Hi, everybody. My name's Andy Lewis. I actually got a promotion a few months ago, so my job title is wrong here. So I now look after procurement excellence. And for those that don't know what procurement excellence do, I think the best way to describe it is we do what category managers don't like doing. So we try and do like process, policy, we look after the SRM program, risk, ESG. So it's all of those things that procurement professionals need to do and need to know, but we're that kind of team that sits in the middle to support the category managers so they've got enough time to do their important day jobs. And the organisation I work for is Convatec, and if you don't know who Convatec are, we're a FTSE 100 medical device company, and we make products for infusion care, continence care, ostomy care, and wound care. So that's just a little bit about me and Convatec.
Yeah, perfect. But let's dive into SRM and starting off with some definitions, because if I asked anyone in here, or just 10 people, we would probably get 10 different definitions of what that actually is. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, for me, I think about it in its purest form. It is about managing the relationships with your suppliers and trying to, I guess, extract as much value from them and moving from a kind of a transactional relationship that you may have with that supplier to actually thinking about how do we get value out of them. The key word in all of this is relationship. So it's that two-way dialogue. So you're not just talking about kind of price increases and price decreases, but you're trying to drive that value with suppliers. So I really think about it in its purest form. It's about growing that relationship with the supplier.
Good. And why did you actually start to focus on this? Like any specific challenges or goals or anything you wanted to achieve?
I think it was a maturity thing, Nicolai, to be perfectly honest. So if I think about where Convatec were over the last 3 or 4 years, it really was transactional relationships with suppliers. It was they would come to us with price increases and we would try and knock them down 5%, and that was how we would operate, or we would try to it was just trying to work with price increases, decreases, but there wasn't anything about that relationship. And I think we changed in terms of our maturity. A new VP came in and said, we need to do better than that. We need to really drive value with suppliers. So yeah, it was that maturity change, a change of leadership within procurement that said we need to focus on our suppliers, and that's why we put the program in place.
Yeah, got it. I mean, we've heard many stories, and I had one actually myself recently, a company that came to us. They've been trying to cut costs over years, and then a few years ago, 2 years ago, with all the supply shortage and stuff, they really ended up in a pickle because they've been doing this to one of the most important suppliers, and now they weren't the customer of choice, and the power had actually shifted over to the supplier, and they actually had to say, no, we can't supply you anymore, and that cost them so much money because that was loss of sales and production and all of that. So yeah, moving away from that transactional and cost focus is definitely what we also see. Yeah, cool. And is it something you only work with within the procurement team? Is it like a company's wide initiative, or how do you do it?
But procurement has certainly taken the lead. So we manage the relationship with the suppliers. So it is up to us to have the program and understand which suppliers we're working through, which suppliers we really want to have those relationships with. But it does fit in with the corporate strategy around kind of resilience. What are we doing with single source suppliers? How are we growing those relationships with those key suppliers? A real key kind of corporate objectives, but it is the procurement team kind of leading that charge.
Okay, yeah. And how do you start? Like, how do you decide which suppliers? Because I think everyone knows that you can't have thousands of suppliers that you manage like a proper SRM program with. So how do you get started?
Yeah, so for us at Convatec, I mean, we've got around 7,000 suppliers, but really kind of on the direct side, raw material suppliers, about 250 is probably the way to look at it. So we basically said, okay, as you would in procurement, look at spend first and say who are your kind of your high spend suppliers, but also looked at the revenue that those suppliers were supporting, but also brought in other factors about who are the suppliers we want to grow relationships with, who are the ones that we can work with on innovation. And basically we had then a matrix of 3 strategic tiers, so strategic tier 1, strategic tier 2, strategic tier 3, and the rest were tactical. So we have only about 5 suppliers in that first tier, and they are the ones that we want real kind of strong relationships with. We meet on a quarterly basis. Once a year, our executive vice president will go and meet that supplier as well. We'll have about 10 suppliers that we would put in the tier 2 bracket, and they would very much be having also the quarterly business reviews. Our VP of procurement would go and visit those suppliers once a year, and then we have probably about 80 in the third tier, and the rest are tactical. So that's how we kind of segmented our suppliers in our SRM program.
All right, cool. And you said, of course, you meet with them. Any other activities that you do, and also getting to the talking point of, and then how do you measure the effects and hopefully successes of this program, which often is the hard part, talking about SRM?
Yeah, and I think it's still a challenge for us, if I'm perfectly honest. So we do track how often we meet those suppliers and make sure that we've done the right cadence with those suppliers. But we also ask the category managers to do quite a bit. So fill in a scorecard before they've met those suppliers and assess them on things like sustainability and risk and quality and their overall performance. We also ask them to kind of fill in a tracker afterwards as well in terms of how the supplier is done following the meeting. So you can kind of have a good idea of which suppliers are doing well and which suppliers maybe could do better. But to really kind of say if the program has been successful or not, I still think we're in that phase of trying to work out whether it is successful.
Yeah, you said performance if they do well. Do you have any sort of incentive programs when you try to get them to do better, and preferred supplier status, awards, or maybe even the opposite, penalties?
Yeah. No, that's another thing we struggle with, to be honest, and it's something that I'd quite like to understand a bit more, maybe from yourself as well, with clients that you've worked with, because that's something we don't have. Those 5 tier 1 suppliers are tier 1 suppliers, but what does it actually mean to them? And I think we haven't articulated that very well to our suppliers to say, hey, if you become a tier 1 supplier, that means X, Y, and Z. Naturally, it probably means that they do have more business, but it's not something that we've necessarily articulated very well. And I don't know, Nicolai, if you've got any examples of your clients in terms of incentives and penalties that they might put on suppliers in SRM.
There's definitely a variety of that, and I think you mentioned some of it, which is going from, of course, awarding them with more business. It can also be giving them better contractual terms if they reach a certain tier in your whatever measurements that you have, a bronze, silver, gold, or whatever. So something like that. Of course, you give them awards just for the sake of recognition, and some you then invite to some celebration show or whatever, just to show that. So it can come in many shapes and forms to incentivize. I'm more a fan of that than the penalty version myself. But yeah, I guess both can work if done correctly. Good. You work with this not only in your current company but also in the past. Do you have any stories that's concrete, that something that came out of this initiative of applying SRM, some good wins or something?
Yeah, it's great you asked that, because it was probably only last week where we had a relationship with a supplier that kind of completely turned around. It's a supplier that we'd been working with probably 4 or 5 years now. A single source supplier to us, so really important to us, but a very transactional relationship, based in Asia, and they would often hit us with a price increase every year, 15%, 20%, and we would just accept it. We didn't have a relationship with them. They're probably making so much money out of us, each year, just being able to throw these, and we would never really kind of get to the root of that problem, and we included them in our SRM program. In fact, they were a tier 2 supplier, and why this is interesting, because it was only last week that the VP went out to meet the supplier in Asia with the category director. And the first time that anybody from our business had sat down with that supplier to talk through that supplier, why do we get these price increases? What are you doing? How can we support you? Is there innovation we can work on? And the supplier was thrilled that we went to visit them, because they said, we haven't had this sort of relationship previously with anybody at Convatec. No price increase this year.
Yeah.
And also working on innovation now with us to try to find new solutions. And it's just a simple example of how that supplier was actually neglected by us, and we just had that kind of transactional relationship where we bizarrely just accepted these price increases really without digging under the surface, and that's completely changed. And just a real life example of something that's really recently happened where we've had a success with the SRM program.
Great example. And I guess, I mean, we have plenty of those also with our clients and others that we speak to about SRM in the industry, and it's definitely an example that I've heard before, that you neglect them, but once you start talking to them, well, sometimes you start to speak about things that, then brings new opportunities. And I think within SRM, I mean, the innovation part is often put as like the pinnacle of it all, but you don't need to make it a big thing. It's really can be anything from creating small things together to like a fully fledged new shared factory in the east or whatever that we've heard of. We have one client who recently co-created a new packaging for some meat products together, and that has caused a lot of savings for them. They've gotten an award because it saves a lot of plastic, so they also had some brand recognition of that, and now it's actually being kind of like used as the go-to thing, not only for them, but in the entire market in Denmark. So that came out of this innovation project where they had this innovation contest, I guess, where they invited all suppliers to hand in ideas, and then they picked the best and started to work on some of them. So yeah, but you can do it in so many ways. Yeah. But of course, it's all not good. Any challenges coming out of this as well?
I think our biggest challenges are probably internal, and I think it's really trying to understand that a category manager, and I'm not a category manager, like I said, I sit in procurement excellence. They are busy people, and they've got fires that they're fighting, and they've got their kind of day job, and we ask them now to fill in these kind of scorecards before they have their quarterly business reviews with these key suppliers. But also go and ask the business, go and ask the person who's working closely with that supplier to help fill in that scorecard. And then once they go visit the supplier, to come back and then update that scorecard with additional information. And I think it's probably kind of too much work for the category manager to do. And because sometimes it's too much work and no one's then chasing, they're not necessarily filling in the details. And then when we want to benchmark against suppliers, we're noticing that, somebody didn't fill in the information for against this supplier, and then the exercise doesn't work as well as it could do. So I think the challenge we're having at the moment is to try to make the process easier for the category managers to be able to fill in scorecards and just simplify the process for them, because they're getting the value by going to meet the supplier. We could probably simplify how much they need to complete when they come back.
Good. One challenge I often hear is how do you manage that balance between having a good relationship, being super friendly and open to new ideas, but at the same time, and as much as we don't want to talk about cost focus, you still need to negotiate the best price possible and have that commercial competitiveness. So how do you manage that balance?
I think they can work hand in hand, because we often have suppliers that we're talking to, and they want to be able to show us the new product that they've got that's maybe more expensive than the existing product, but maybe it's got better efficiencies in our manufacturing process, or maybe it's going to reduce our ESG emissions, or maybe they're talking about kind of a dual sourcing strategy as well. So I think, we're all in procurement here, so driving down cost is what we want to do, but we can have that relationship, we can have that conversation to understand what else can they offer. And without supplier relationship management, you don't have those conversations to be able to understand what's happening. So I find we're able to balance them, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah, good. Just mindful of time, but another problem or a question we get is like, or an assumption rather, is that this is mostly for large companies. I mean, this is, if we want to implement this is not for us. We're too small for this. We just do what we do. This is for the big guys. Is that true, or do you see anyone being able to use this?
I personally don't think that. I think anybody can do SRM, and I think you can keep it as simple as you like. I mean, we tiered suppliers, about, was it 100 suppliers or 95 suppliers we've tiered, but if you're a smaller organisation, who are your most important suppliers? Is it just, top 5, top 10? And then what do you want to get out of that relationship with the supplier? Is it driving innovation? Is it understanding more about ESG? You can put a very simple kind of scorecard together, and I think you can really keep it simple and just work with a smaller number of suppliers rather than having a larger program in place.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you're not a small company, and you only have 5, you said?
Five in that
tier
top
one, so
tier, yeah.
That's a very good example,
Yeah.
actually, yeah. So you also mentioned risk, and I think like everything is being piled into procurement these days. Risk ESG, one of the new kids on the block, also something we see in SRM. It sounded like you work with that as well.
Absolutely. ESG and risk are embedded into our SRM approach. I think one of the things you think about around your relationships with suppliers is how resilient your supply chain is. So we, all of those suppliers I mentioned in our strategic tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 go through a risk assessment as well, where we look at them in terms of their financial health, in terms of whether they are single source suppliers, what mitigation actions we have in terms of holding more stock or qualifying the suppliers. So yeah, we absolutely embed risk into our SRM process. And also on the ESG side, I think everybody these days is trying to drive that agenda. We're no different, and trying to find those kind of efficiencies where you can link your relationship with the supplier to driving down your emissions in your supply chain is certainly something we're trying to do.
Yeah, got it. I know time is running. Just one final, any like good advice, hands-on advice, if anyone's looking to get started with an SRM focus?
For me, just start small. I mean, it's the best way. Start with a small number of suppliers, but get started. Keep it simple and see where it goes. You can always adapt your strategy. Enable it to evolve. We're doing that right now. We're re-looking at how we assess our suppliers, what we do about new product development and innovation suppliers we bring into the organisation. So I think you've always got that ability, but if you don't start, I guess nothing will happen. If you try and start, then at least it gives you the opportunity to do something.
Got it. I don't know if we have any more time for any questions.
We're a little bit tight for time, I'm afraid, but
okay.
You will be around for a little while, won't you, if anyone has any questions and wants to ask outside. So thank you both very much, Andy and Nicolai. That was a really fascinating discussion. And thank you very much for joining us. A round of applause, please, for our speakers.